Welcome, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Quick check, if you don't mind. You have a react and a raise hand in the top right-hand corner of Teams. If everyone can just give me a little hand raise or a react, just to make sure that you can, first of all, see my slide deck, but also hear me quite clearly. Brilliant. Fantastic. No, that's great to hear. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today and allowing me the opportunity to speak to you today. Today, we're going to be talking for session 3. It's around driving growth with RoleModelplus and giving you a consultant's perspective, which allows me to really try and jump into a bit of an introduction. So today, welcome. I am Nick Phillips. I am a BCS employee. I'm a SFIA-Plus consultant. I have been with BCS for probably about 8 or so years now, doing kind of what I do. I'm going to be talking around a consultant's perspective really today. We've got a lot to really cover, but we only have a short amount of time. So if you do have any questions, feel free to pop it into the chat and we'll get to it when we jump into the question section. But really, I want to talk about what a consultant can do for those that are working with RoleModelplus, SFIA-Plus, and really kind of the impact that we have when supporting an organization. Now, as a consultant who has worked across many organizations and frameworks, I'm excited to talk to you about how we really transform theory potentially into growth, right? And why clarity really is the cornerstone of capability. This talk is essentially more than just SFIA-Plus and RoleModelplus. It's more about how we align frameworks with reality and turn complex governance into practical, people-driven success. And there's 3 points I really want to cover. There are 3 key themes. 1, clarity. 2, confidence. And 3, benchmarking. Those are the 3 areas we'll cover. Making roles meaningful and usable, building confidence by enabling accountability through structure, and building strategic growth through insight. Okay. Again, any questions, pop it at the end and I'll get to them as soon as I can. Now, let me just jump over to this slide. If you haven't already seen the demo for RoleModelplus, this is not the place to be. We've previously done that in a previous session. There is a recording for it. Please feel free to take a look at it. I highly encourage taking a look at it. It delivers a huge, powerful set of capabilities and tools. I'm not going to dwell on the tech or the features and benefits shown in this slide, how it supports employers or management. Or an organization when we're utilizing them. Today, my focus is really about how we unlock the benefits through a structured consulting approach. Now, SFIA-Plus is a tool that allows you to become a strategic accelerator when using it effectively. When correctly used, it helps an organization move from vague, at times, role definitions and other times, so like siloed HR data into a more unified, transparent system that allows you to drive areas such as performance, development, and compliance. And that journey, usually, when we're talking about the context of SFIA, role model, the depth that comes from it, usually requires more than just some implementation, right? It usually requires a lot of interpretation, and that's usually where a consultant such as SFIA consultant and so on really comes in. And that kind of nicely transitions over to my first area, really about defining clear, consistent roles aligned to SFIA, SFIA-Plus. So let's start with something we would say is deceptively simple, and that's role clarity. You'd be surprised how many organizations I've worked with operate without truly a defined role for an individual or an organization or a department. We see job titles and responsibilities, written in paragraph. Maybe there's a competency matrix, but there's nothing really that ties it all together, such as the skills, the autonomy, the business impact, and the development that can support in one coherent structure. And this is where SFIA-Plus provides that structure. It gives you lots of tools. It allows you to really build a validated taxonomy around skills. It gives you a high level of responsibility that reflects autonomy and complexity, very deep within the framework. And it gives you a lot of contextual depth. whether it be qualifications, training experience, additional experience outside of the organization, and giving you opportunities to take on learning pathways. And a lot of it really isn't plug and play. Mapping roles to SFIA requires strategic translation, and consultants usually take the framework and support and shape it around an organization. It might be its culture, its governance, it might be the strategic priorities it might have, or it might be generally its operating model or its hierarchy, how the organization is constructed. Now, consultants generally, when it comes to SFIA and role model creating roles, we challenge an awful lot. We do push back, we do question, and we like to not assume. We like detail. And that's what we do. We challenge assumptions. We get a clear basis and understanding. We design workshops that are based around profiling skills that are required for a role. And then we build templates, which are usually 9 times out of 10 scalable and sustainable generally over time. So this isn't something that's just a rinse and repeat. It's something that we build, we design, we develop. And this is really what happens when we bring a consultant on board to support understanding our roles, utilizing SFIA+ and RoleModelplus. And as you can see, once clearly clarity is enabled, we gain a few additions that can support an organization. Teams understand purpose through clarity. Managers lead with structure because there's defined purpose. Roles become actionable and not theoretical. I always talk about my previous history, my background. I used to be a business analyst. I have worked with lots of different organizations now. And when we talk about a BA, we talk about it very generally, whether it be not just BA, project managers, those that are within solution architecture, engineers. A BA is not just a BA. A project manager is not just a project manager. We can give context and depth, and there's usually a lot of specialization that comes into these roles. So we can now action skills against them and give organizations, individuals, real actionable goals that are needed. This supports workforce planning and involves generally from a reactive point to a proactive point, giving people outputs that they can actually adhere to, work to, and develop onwards. In short, with a consultant on board working with RoleModelplus or SFIA+, giving that depth and expertise, whether it be workshops, challenging the norm, or building those templates that are sustainable over time, we can essentially build a clear springboard. And a consultant is essentially the person that's ensuring that the leap doesn't miss. It's the best way of putting it. Now, let's talk about embedding roles, clarity, and building confidence, which is really the key word out of this across a team. Now, when we're talking about confidence, when it comes to roles that are structured clearly, confidence usually follows. Individuals know what's expected, as mentioned. Leaders know how to coach and also how to measure, and organizations move away from ambiguity. And that's the key point here, is remove yourself from the unknown, know what's expected, needed, have steps in place, and have milestones and pathways. And through that, through support, through consultancy, whether it be within any of the areas, whether it be SFIA+ as a framework or other frameworks do exist through what we do, we can give that clear transparency and guidance. Excuse me. Now, using RoleModelplus, you can build profiles that go well beyond a list of tasks, as you may already be aware if you've seen the demo. And these profiles reflect the scope of influence, that depth that's needed, the level of complexity. And as you may know, SFIA+ has over 130 different skills covering a multitude of levels from level 1 to 7. So you can see there's a lot of different depth and detail there. And skill depths sit within that. And they're across all of those categories. And also embedded development guidance that sits alongside that. Now, sorry, that slide didn't load. Now, with that precision that we can add through using role model and SFIA+, it allows audit trails to become transparent, role transitions to become clean and clear, compliance to become measurable. So there's steps, there's bounds, there's requirements and ways of hitting them. And there's also a way for leadership alignment to become more of the norm, not the exception, delivering growth. But clearly, clarity doesn't really spread organically, as you've probably noticed within your organizations or wherever you come for a period where you wanted to develop and grow. Consultants can guide the rollout when we're trying to facilitate this. We facilitate inclusive workshops, bring in management and individuals together to make sure that we have that clarity, ensuring staff own their profiles and their skills rather than being handed to them. That's something that maybe is more prescriptive for the organization, less of the growth for the individual, which is what we really need to build on our skills, is being given an individual the opportunity to take the steps that are required to deliver the outputs that are needed for their own professional growth, not just for the organization. And we help calibrate those levels, best way of putting it. Taking those 130 or so skills, covering those 7 levels, there's a lot of depth and detail. We make sure that once we have our roles in place, that we can calibrate them across departments. So we have a equality, is the best way of putting it, and comparability across roles. Now, most importantly, we like to make sure that they don't just align across groups and departments, but also across governance. This might be ISO requirements that you might be GDPR requirements, it might be internal, external intricacies that might be there, assurance models, we can also implement those as well. So when done right, every person in the organization really knows what is required and how they do it, and where, I like to highlight, where their and why their role matters in that organization, giving purpose. So just kind of reiterate, confidence isn't just a soft outcome, it's operational, it supports, it guides, and it develops. It brings momentum and enthusiasm. So just on to my last point, benchmarking, creating meaningful benchmarking that supports an individual. Strategic planning and with insight. Once we create roles, once we've worked with an organization, once we've understood the depths, the intricacies, the requirement, whether it be an organization with 1 department, 10 departments, 5 roles, 100 roles, all intricate, all specific, all purposeful for an individual, for a department, for an organization. Benchmarking is something that we talk about, but sometimes can feel underutilized. I've come across lots of organizations in the past and also in personal experience when we're talking about benchmarking, we sometimes think of it maybe as a bit of a checkbox exercise, a HR, maybe a compliance exercise, making sure that we understand our GDPR, we understand our profiles, our skills, our expectations, how are we looking for development. But when we implement it with a consultant and to support an organization with RoleModelplus and SFIA-aligned, there's a lot more that can be brought out through benchmarking. It allows benchmarking to become transformational rather than a spreadsheet or a checkbox exercise in some cases. Not all the same, it does happen. So, what does RoleModelplus help us do when we talk about benchmarking? Well, once our roles are in, complete, connected to the organization, ready to go, individuals are connected to it, and they have outcomes, milestones, and pathways, they're able to compare roles internally and in some cases externally, outside of their department, how their skills transpose across the business. They can assess current capabilities, so they can look at their now, what is required, again, how am I going to get there? Well, that's done through understanding our future needs and requirements, identifying gaps or critical gaps that the organization may have, the individual may have, and so on. And not just any gaps, but really what is required for you to do that role, for you to require to become a specialist, to building your leadership skills, building your behavioral skills, as mentioned before, maybe the compliance side and so on. And then also really, most importantly, shape development. That's really the key and the core that's required from role model. is being able to shape development plans based on actual skill requirements. I go back to kind of the analogy, soft analogy earlier around a BA role isn't just a BA role, project manager isn't just a project manager. There are many, many different aspects that are required from being a BA in an organization. You may have to understand the areas of AI, development, implementation, whereas another organization may not be the case. These are roles that are created for you, your individuals, your organizations, your departments, to make sure that you have the actual requirements that are needed, not just for now and for development, but also for those future needs, whether it be projects in the future, expectations, changing governance, new ISOs coming into the future, a new skill set, maybe AI changes again, and we need to update ourselves and our skills that are required or maintain AI. Just an example. It allows us to have those required skills that are needed. And we consistently build on SFIA-Plus, just so you're aware. Every few years, we build on top of it, grow it. It started with about 30 skills, now we're at 130. So you can see how much our industry has grown and developed. Now, consultants bring the context. Really, how do we do that? We avoid analyzing and paralysis, and focus on actionable data. So we gain data, we understand needs, requirements, we build on top of it. We help build segments the workforce is required to build business impact. We design benchmarking frameworks and align them with strategic goals. Every organization is different. We work closely with that organization to understand your needs and how we do that, and how do we take the steps that are required to really build and grow your needs for the next 6 months or 10 years. And when we look at benchmarking across outputs, we want to inform succession. If you're here, how do we take the next steps onto the next area within our skill set? What training investments may we require? So there are many areas that we can support in as a consultant and give more depth and detail. Hopefully this has given you some insight into how consultant can support within role model. It's always nice to talk about this from a perspective of those working with organizations. A few final thoughts really before questions. If you haven't already got the message, I'll highlight it loud and clear. Growth really comes with clarity. Confidence builds from structure, and benchmarking powers strategic action. RoleModelplus, underpinned by SFIA-Plus, gives organizations really a scaffold to kind of build intelligent, capable and accountable teams. And if they are already at that level, it benchmarks them to prove that they are working at the level, give that confidence, say, I am at this point and I am developing forward. It's not just a checkbox exercise when we're talking about benchmarking. But really, you know, the framework isn't always enough, and this is why consultants come in to guide and support with the transformation of that. Interpreting models, whether it be frameworks internally or externally, supporting with the governance areas mentioned, or, you know, embedding more with the culture of what's required and the direction of an organization, and making those requirements really usable with the framework is always nice. But our job isn't just to implement, it's to elevate. Again, building that confidence is always really important. And because when roles are clearly defined, consistently benchmarked and understood by everyone, it's not just about efficiency, it's about leadership and motion. And that's the most important part, and the support that a consultant can really support within Role Model and SFIA-Plus. Hopefully that's been useful to you, giving you a little bit of insight. Sean, quick, hopefully it's giving you something to think about. I am going to jump over to questions, so I'll jump into the chat now. And if there are any, I will get right back to you. So Gareth, let me just read that question if you don't mind. Good question. So how much language translation is needed from framework wording to existing in-company terminology? Or do we find that most companies tend to adopt the framework terms? Every organization is different, as I mentioned, but we have seen it go both ways. Some decide to work directly with the framework's explicit terminology. However, many of the organizations we've worked with have looked at it, and because of the capability of the framework and role model, can add a level of customization to it. If descriptions and terminology, level of depth, understanding is not quite what the organization needs or the role needs, we can always update that and maintain it. And that's where that conversation comes in when we work those workshops, and we really understand the depth of what you may require. Like I said, every role is different. It's not a cookie cutter exercise, is it? Everyone has a different requirement, and really understanding that allows us to have that customization if required. Or if we're happy with the framework as is, in many cases that is the case, go with that. But again, customization is key when we really want to go into the deep dive detail. Stuart, let me take a look at that question. Good question. It seems like this would be useful in driving goal setting and personal annual reviews. It can be used in that way, in that respect, if so chosen. Many organizations have used it to understand where we've come from and where we've got to, and how have we jumped those milestones to get to where we need to be, set development goals and so on, and that has been used. But it's also very useful for gaining evidence of where you've come from and how you've got there as well, and however your organization may use that, that information is exportable as well, so hopefully that's useful to you. Segmenting. Sarah, you've had a question around segmenting. Are you able to be a bit more specific on that one? Are you talking about the previous slide? Oh, there you go. Sorry. We help segmenting the workforce by business impact. So when we're talking about segmenting across an organization, there are many different departments, many different routes, and many different steps. To put this plainly, every role is different in the respect of what's required from skills. It's about segmenting the skills that are required, making sure that some of these skills do transition across to the right individuals or the right part of the organization if required, and if not required, taking them away. So we have very clear transparency of what roles are supposed to be doing and what roles are not supposed to be doing. That's the best way I can explain that, if that's useful to you. Making sure we have the right impact from the right roles. Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you all. If there isn't any other questions, thank you so much for your time. Hopefully that's giving you some insight into what a consultant does to support within Role Model. Have a lovely day all. This recording will be available. If you have any additional questions outside of the session, feel free to drop us a message, an email at developmyteam@bcs.uk. Thank you all for your time. Hope you have a good day now, and no doubt speak to you at some point. Take care and bye.